Hello everybody. Today I'm going to talk about Mercrusiers and their locked up steering cables. It's a fairly common problem from what I understand, and most of the time it goes misdiagnosed. It's not a hard fix. It just takes a little effort and a little patience. I searched the web, I couldn't find anything, so I figured I'll throw this little video out there, maybe it'll help somebody. We're going to start with how to diagnose your problem. Most of the time, people don't find out the steering doesn't work till they're in the water, which is always bad. But and a lot of times they think it's the actuator when it's really not. They seldom go bad. It's usually a cable seized up. All right, we're down in here now. What we're working on is an 88 Wellcraft 220 Excel with a 7.4 liter Magnum Mercrusier in it with a Mercrusier power assist steering. What we're looking at right here is the steering rod. This is actually the end of the cable where it comes out from the firewall right there. That big piece behind it is the steering actuator. Now, the first thing you're going to want to do to diagnose this problem is, of course, you're going to try to turn the steering wheel. It's not going to turn. What you're going to do is you're going to come right down in here. That is the shaft, the yoke that comes out from the outdrive unit. That is the yoke that goes on it. There's a clevis pin in that. You're going to want to remove that clevis pin. It is really hard to get that joker out. They're usually rusted in, and they're very, very short. They're hard to get out. I ended up having to take a flat grinder, an angle grinder, and grind the tip off of the bottom because the clevis pin was rusted in solid. Once you get that out, you should be able to grab that shaft and just move it back and forth. You may have to break the power steering lines loose to do that, but as long as that shaft moves, your actuator's probably okay. The next thing you're going to want to do is you're going to come over here to the other end of your cable where it goes into the housing. This is the housing I'm talking about. There's going to be a big bolt right there. You can take that out. It's probably be a bunch of rusty water and other crap run out of there. But this bolt right here slides back and forth on that cable, and it actually screws on to this piece, to the end cable. You're going to take that loose, turn your steering wheel. It's probably going to move the whole thing. If that's the case, your cable's probably froze up inside the feed tube. The feed tube attaches on this side of that block. Do not try to remove this block. They don't come off. And if you do, you're probably going to break it. Okay? What you're going to do is you're going to unscrew that big nut that goes on, it's built onto that tube. You're going to want to unscrew it. It's going to be, you're probably going to have to wait and tap on this end of the cable. What you're going to want to do is you're going to want to put a clevis pin back in here and put a cotter pin on it to keep it from falling out, because you want to protect this hole. You don't want to deform this hole when you're pounding on this end. You might want to put a wood block there. I didn't use a wood block. I didn't have a problem. I would recommend getting some penetrating fluid, probably some PB Blaster, some good high-speed stuff. Spray it in there, let it sit overnight. That's what I did. I got a little carried away with my vice grips right here, but it's on the very tip, and that part doesn't slide in and out of the tube. So what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to tap on this till it starts to move. That whole shaft will start to move inside the black tube. This is the tube I'm talking about. This is the guide tube for that cable. It slides on like this. Okay? It's got a lot of thread on it. That thread goes all the way through that little block, and you're going to want to start tapping on that end. This will still be attached. Tap on it till it starts to move. When it starts to move, you want to put your vice grips on that. You want to put a pair of vice grips on the outside of this tube, and you want to gently start to try to turn this piece right here. And just work it and work it and work it. Keep spraying your penetrating oil in it. Tap on it with a hammer a few times until it really starts to move good, till you've moved it an inch or two. Then this nut, which is built onto this pipe, screws into that metering block. You see the washers there. You want to start turning it out counterclockwise. And it is a lot of thread that goes all the way through that little block, and it goes through to that far, because that collar on the other side of that cable is what screws on here. So you're going to have that all the way off, and you want to start screwing on this until you screw it. This is like a jam nut. You're going to back it off, and then you're going to have to turn this entire pipe. I had to put vice grips on this pipe to turn it. Okay? And you're going to turn it all the way out, and you're just going to keep working it until you slide it off of this rod. Now, the inside of this tube was full of corrosion, rust, just all kinds of garbage. You can't really see it now. I've cleaned it out pretty good. But you can see in there where it's been pitted. You see the pits up in there where the corrosion was in it for years and years. Once you get that off, and I recommend you go before you start your repair, you're going to go to Harbor Freight. They sell this lovely little engine brush kit. It's about 18 bucks. It comes with an extension piece and a lock on it where you can put these brushes on that and hook it to the bottom of your drill. You're going to use that and you are going to drill out, you're going to brush out the inside of this. Lots of penetrating oil. I would start with the steel brush. That's what I did. Here's the steel brush. It did a really good job of knocking out the big heavy stuff. And then I switched over to that brass brush to kind of finish it up a little bit. Once you get all that out, you're going to want to take this tube, clean it out real good, use some brake cleaner, and after it dries, you're going to want to pack it full of bearing grease. I mean, just fill it up. You cannot have enough grease on this thing to lubricate the inside of it. This tube is made of steel. They rust, they corrode. Newer boats, these are made out of aluminum or stainless, and you don't have this problem. Then you're going to want to come back here to your shaft. This is actually your cable. This is what runs to your helm station. You're going to want to clean this. This looks like it's stainless. You're going to want to clean it real good with some cleaner, some very fine sandpaper, very fine, or some emery cloth and a couple of rags till you get it nice and clean and shiny. You're going to want to lubricate it real good too. And then you're going to start feeding this tube back down. Well, put the nut part in, remember that. You're going to want to start feeding that tube back over there. It's a tight fit. It really is a tight fit. I was really surprised. Until you get it all the way back down to that metering block, and you can thread it back in. Be careful not to cross thread it. This nut here is like 1.5 inches. I could not find a wrench short enough to get in there, so I had to use vice grips or a real small crescent wrench. Get that back in there. Get it all the way into where it was, you know. And make sure you got your washers and everything in place there. Screw your cable end on, and you should be able to move that cable freely back and forth with the steering wheel. Then you're going to want to line up your pinholes. That one goes into there. Okay, I'm not sure if it goes in just one way. From what I understand, they have to be facing up and down. And then once you get that in, you should be able to turn your steering wheel to bring it back to line that yoke up. Now, the clevis pins, let me tell you, they are hard to find. Our boat dealer did not stock them, but the clevis pins are hard to find. My boat dealer did not stock them, but good old Tractor Supply has these right here, 3/8 by 2 inch. They're a little bit longer than the one, but if you see, they have multiple holes, so you can put your cotter pin back in there to attach it all back together. A few little important things you might want to know. That hole you see on top there, that is the mounting bolt for the actuator. This is the bolt. It's a big old bolt. If you see, it has this stainless steel retaining clip on it, that when this is in place, that little notch goes over that rib you see right there on top, and then that little clip gets bent up. The only time you need to remove these things is if you're going to have to take that steering actuator out. These clips right here are stainless steel, and they are super tough. You're not going to bend them with a pair of pliers or a screwdriver. I got lucky, this one was out enough I could still get my socket in it. Actually, I used a wrench on the top here, but the one on the bottom is even worse. The only way to get these things off, according to the guy at the boat shop, is to grind that tab off. And then when you put it back on, you just have to align one of these other tabs and bend it up to where it'll hold that nut from backing out. Don't remove those unless you have to take the steering actuator off. It is a bear. This little deal right here is another locking type tab. It goes to the big bolt that goes in the front of that gear housing right there. This wasn't so hard to get out. I took that out thinking that I'd be able to take that whole block off. That block does not come off. So there you go. Those are your lines. Now when you break your lines loose, you see there's some rust up in there. You're going to want to make sure you got a bucket or a jug. I used an antifreeze or a washer fluid jug here to catch that transmission fluid. You don't want that going down into your bilge. That's just a mess. But anyhow, long story short, after you get everything lubricated up, covered in good grease, get the tube back in position, assembly is the reverse of, you know, taking it apart. Of course, I do see some grease fittings back in there that we're going to have to hit with the grease gun for sure, just to make sure. You hook your lines back up. Everyone talks about bleeding the system, bleeding the system. This thing runs on an old style GM power steering pump. It's a self-bleeding system because it is a loop. What you're going to want to do, I would recommend draining all the fluid out of here. Start with fresh fluid, and once you get it hooked back up and you get your lines hooked back up, make sure you got your muffs on your boat, fire it up, and just work that steering wheel back and forth. It will bleed the air out of the system because it's a loop. It's got a return line, it's got an inlet line. It brings it right back to the reservoir and blows the air bubbles out of the reservoir. Make sure you got the cap on so you don't splash power steering fluid all over the inside of your boat. Other than that, it's pretty simple. I hope this helps everybody. I couldn't find anything online. Good luck. It's not that hard. Just be patient.